All right, P.A.S. report listeners, the holiday season is here. Why not make your life easy and choose design-it-yourself gift baskets? Whether it's a gift for that special someone, family, friends, employees, corporate clients, you don't have to rack your brain anymore. These gift baskets are perfect for any person. At designityourselfgiftbaskets.com, gift baskets can be fully customizable, or you can choose hundreds of pre-arranged gift baskets. Design It Yourself gift baskets are festive for the holiday season, whether it's Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, and you can be sure that these beautifully decorated gift baskets will make anyone feel appreciated. No matter who you're shopping for, go to designityourselfgiftbaskets.com. And best of all, you get to save money. P.A.S. report listeners can get 10% off your order using code PAS at checkout. So go to DIYGB.com, find the perfect gift this holiday season, and use coupon code PAS at checkout to get 10% off today.
Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. Here we are. Tomorrow is the big day. You have millions of Americans who are going to go to the polls. They're going to cast their ballot. They're going to decide whether we stay the course, continue following a failed Democrat agenda, or whether Americans have had enough and they want to move the country in a new direction. It's all up to the voters now. That's the beauty of the system. We will see where it goes from here, but at this point, it does appear that Republicans are going to recapture the House, take the Senate. I'm sticking with the prediction I made on Your Island with Tom Shalero a few weeks ago. Republicans will gain 35 to 45 seats in the House. They're going to pick up 3 Senate seats. I am also making the bold prediction that Congressman Lee Zeldin will be the next governor of New York State. If you asked me a week and a half ago, I would have told you that it's going to be a very close race, but I give the edge to Empress Hochul. However, something happened over the last 2 weeks. In fact, 2 things happened. First, Hochul turned into a really poor debate performance and showed how out of touch she is when she asked Zeldin why he was so obsessed with crime. Then something worse happened, something far worse. That should have never have happened. Kira Benefield was brutally beaten by her estranged husband. When I say beating, it was a savage beating. Only a vicious monster could do something like that to a woman and the mother of his own children. Ms. Benefield begged police to help. A week later, he was arrested. But because of our pathetic bail reform laws that have destroyed our system, he was released. He was released. Hours later, 8:30 in the morning, as she was driving their children to school, he rammed his car into hers, got out, and allegedly shot her execution style in front of her children where blood splattered all over them. So when Empress Hochul said, "Why are you so obsessed with crime and bail reform?" This is why. This is a murder that should never have happened. This is a man that should have never been on the streets. And I think this murder will be what propels Zeldin over the finish line. And I know it's horrible to use this murder when doing political analysis. She is a human being, and the family deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. They deserve our prayers. They're going through a really difficult time. Her murder should not be used as a political pawn, but this is the reality in which we live in right now. It's the result of failed Democrat policies, and we have to call it out. Instead of examining their failed policies, what do? They target political opponents, of course. They go right back to labeling political opponents as fascists and extremists, domestic terrorists, threats to democracy. The divider-in-chief delivered another one of his dark speeches, and the rhetoric alone is bad enough, but when you look at how nearly every political institution is being weaponized based on ideology, it becomes frightening. It's why I'm bringing in Lee Smith. Lee is the author of 2 great books, The Plot Against the President and The Permanent Coup. And like me, he has been growing increasingly concerned about the abuses of power and how some of our institutions have become nothing more than the enforcers of a political party. It's a system that can't go on this way, so I'm looking forward to the conversation. Before I bring in Lee, make sure to visit the P.A.S. Report website. Last week, I was on Dr. Phil on Fox News to discuss the collapse of our education system. I think it was an eye-opening episode for a lot of people out there. Not you, not the P.A.S. Report listeners, because you know I've been harping on education for quite some time. But if you're a new listener, welcome aboard. I'd love to hear from you. You can always drop a review on Apple Podcasts, or you can email me, podcast@pasreport.com. Make sure you visit the website, PASreport.com, sign up for the newsletter. And with that out of the way, I want to bring in author Lee Smith to the PAS Report. It's a conversation I've been looking forward to have. Lee, glad to have you on. How are you today?
Hey, thanks very much. Should I call you Professor Giordano?
You can call me Nick. You don't have to call me
Nick?
Professor, you know.
All right, all right.
It's all
Very nice
good.
to meet you, and thanks for inviting me on today. I really appreciate it.
Well, I wanted to talk to you because you bring up topics that I've been talking about for the last few years as well, about this abuse within our institutions, the abuse of power, and how our institutions have become ideologically corrupted. They've been politically weaponized to target political opponents. What first drew your attention to what was going on?
Well, I mean, you do national security and lots of foreign policy stuff. So it first drew my attention to what was going on is I'd been working on Middle East stuff. I'd been in particular covering the war in Syria, and I knew how the Obama Biden administration had partnered with Vladimir Putin in Syria. And so then to see in late 2016 Obama officials leaking how Trump was close to Putin and there was something funny going on with Russia made absolutely no sense at all. The same people who were actually partnering with Putin were saying that this is what Trump was doing and it was a bad thing. That made no sense. So the second thing that made sense is, I'm from New York originally, and Donald Trump's presence has been part of my life since I was a teenager. And Donald Trump is, he's a world famous celebrity. And he worked also in two businesses that would clearly be closely looked at by law enforcement authorities, casinos and big real estate, especially as that touches on construction. So the idea that the FBI and the NYPD and actually the New York City Press Corps, when it was a legitimate press corps doing its job, that he would have escaped all that attention had he been meeting with Russian officials was absolutely preposterous. So it seemed like garbage to me from the very outset.
That's a great point because as someone that actually teaches international politics, one of the things that drew my attention very early on in this is the fact that foreign governments, particularly countries like Russia and China, they like to know who they're dealing with. They like to be able to predict the policies. They want a Hillary Clinton that has 40 years of policy history where her positions and they know how far they could push. But they couldn't do that with Trump. So it never made sense that they would go all in for President Trump when President Trump was the actual unknown factor. Right. Looking at our institutions, why did they despise this man so much? What was obviously the goal, the permanent coup lays it out, but what was the catalyst? Why did they despise him and why did they want to take him down?
Because I think for the same reason that Donald Trump generated so much support from what Hillary Clinton, now of course famously labeled the deplorables. I think there were people, people in Washington that what we call them the establishment, the elites, the oligarchy. They believed that Donald Trump was a serious threat to their wealth and power and prestige. So they fought him. They fought him. They fought him before he was elected, and then after he was elected, they went crazy fighting him. And I think there were a whole bunch of different issues. I mean, one argument I think's become clearer and clearer to me is that Donald Trump is very vocal about taking on China. And all of these people in various ways are tied into the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, that's the source of their money. And this holds true with the corporate and political establishment. I mean, Joe Biden, we talk about Joe and Hunter Biden in China. I mean, that's really just that's the tip of the iceberg. I mean, the Democratic Party can't have national campaigns without money coming from Hollywood, big tech, academia, and Wall Street, all of which rely on money coming from China. So, but I think the fundamental issue was Donald Trump was saying these people are losers, they're clowns. I know how to set this. I know how to set this right. I know how to fix it. And people said, yeah, well, I agree. These people are losers and clowns. Everything from two strategically pointless wars in the Middle East to the financial crisis. And Trump said, I can fix it. And people trusted him. And the people that Trump was coming after, they heard him call them out. And so they fought back.
And let's be honest here, the elites were never talked that way to, and they didn't like it. They certainly did not like it.
I think that's the biggest thing. It's not just Trump's ideas. It's the way he called them out. He said, they're not just losers, they're moralizing losers. Listen to the excuses and the rationale they come up with. Oh, the freedom, because it's made to because they want to make themselves look beautiful, right? They want to cut a beautiful figure. Oh, no. Well, the reason that we're in Iraq is because we want to implement democracy, or the
moral holy warriors. That's what I call them.
Exactly. And Trump called them out and said, that's garbage. And that's what really got them mad. It wasn't just calling them out as losers. It was said that the whole thing that these guys are trying to sell, it's garbage. And they're trying to make themselves out to be angels. And they're not good people. They've caused trouble around the rest of the world, and they've especially caused trouble in America. So that's what really drove them nuts.
And the amazing part is that foreign policy is usually based off of self-interest, right? So if a country has an authoritarian dictatorship, well, as long as that country does what's in our interest, we don't really care. At least that's the way it used to be. Ever since they became these moral holy warriors, the United States is actually weaker as a nation. I don't think anyone could argue we're stronger. And our adversaries are stronger, particularly China. And they keep on getting more powerful as these people on the inside of our government are destroying us. So now in the president, and the plot against the president, you highlight what Devin Nunes found. And it was mind-blowing. I mean, the abuses of power, what was absolutely mind-blowing, yet not a single person has been held accountable. How do we explain that? How are we going to be able to get some accountability into the system?
It looks like right now, I'm sure you've been watching the Durham,
sadly, yes,
trials, and this is very, it's a shame. And I think what's going to happen is, it's just going to increase calls for the dismantling of the FBI, which is what I call for. I think it's incapable of being reformed at this point. We see what the FBI is doing, right? It's showing up with it's showing up with rifles drawn at the home of pro-life activists.
It's horrifying.
It goes after James O'Keefe. It's going after protesters. Never mind January 6th, right? Infiltrating the January 6th protest and then showing up and, not knocking down those doors and throwing those people away like that. So it's going to be very hard for Republicans, I think, especially if Republicans take control of the House and the Senate. It's going to be very hard for Republican legislators to go against the base and say, no. Actually, I think that we can reform this institution that's been weaponized to destroy you. So let's give it a chance. I think that's unlikely. I think that their constituencies will be like, are you crazy? These people are hunting us. We are really living a Stasi reality here, and it's not a joke. So, insofar as the particular people who are responsible for spying on Donald Trump, who are responsible for interfering in the 2016 election, and then delegitimizing Trump's presidency. If there is,
and then interfering in the 2020 election as well.
Absolutely, and the 2018 midterms, right? That was one of the purposes of the Mueller special counsel. So at least 3 elections were interfered with by the FBI, by Democratic political operatives, and the media, right? Censoring news of Hunter Biden's laptop. This is all the purpose of which is all to defraud the American electorate. So, I think it's going to have to wait until. I think it's going to have to wait until we have another Republican presidency. That's Donald Trump in 2024 or someone else or at some other time.
Well, one of the things that concerns me, especially about the Republicans, so Devin Nunes uncovers all the abuses within the FISA court, within the FBI, within the intelligence community. And then there is the renewing of the Patriot Act. We have the renewal of the FISA bill. And it was just lockstep. Republicans, you got to vote for it. It's national security. It's national security. They didn't implement any type of realistic safeguards to prevent these abuses from ever happening again. So how can we have faith that even if they do get into power, which I do think they'll take the House, and I'm fairly confident they'll probably take the Senate as well, but how do we have faith that they're going to restore integrity into the system when they had the opportunity to do that, but they didn't?
Yeah. one thing is that there are a number of people who we hope will be joining both the House and the Senate. People like Joe Kent and Blake Masters, J.D. Vance, who seem to be who are cutting against the grain of the establishment. And we can hope that they believe that. But the most important part is you and me, your audience. I mean, it's Americans. We are the strength of America. The strength of America is Americans, and it's up to us to demand that they hold people accountable. And that's what I was saying before. I think of Republican legislators are going to be saying, no, we need to reform the FBI. Voters are going to say, no, that's not what we want. We want them gone. We want them off our backs. And that's what has to be done. And if Republicans don't do that, then they'll be called to account for it by Republican voters. And we see some of that starting right now, not necessarily regarding Russiagate, but with other things. I just saw this news, maybe you saw it, but the Alaska GOP has voted something like 49-8 to censure Mitch McConnell, who's spending $5 million to beat their candidate, spending $5 million to support, Lisa Murkowski, who is anything but a Republican.
So as he pulls out of New Hampshire, the Senate race in New Hampshire, and abandons the Republican up there, who's actually challenging Senator Hassan right now.
Right. So people are angry. People have, this is something that Donald Trump absolutely deserves credit for. He didn't discover what was going on. Right. There was the Tea Party. There's been people all along who are saying this is garbage. It can't go on. Donald Trump, God bless him, said there's a movement here. Americans are angry. Americans are frustrated. I see this movement, and I'm going to get out in front of it and lead it. Right. And so he empowered people to see different things. He taught people about China. He taught people about corruption. And he didn't know how bad it was. Right. None of us knew how bad it was. But now look at how motivated people are. Look at how important. And I'm loath to say Republican or conservative, because the different people who are motivated are looking at Republicans as well and saying, no, you don't help us. You're garbage. Right. Yeah. So it's not just Democrats that they're up in arms about. So I'm perpetually optimistic. And lots of people will call me Pollyanna-ish for that. But I mean, again, our center of gravity, America's center of gravity, is not our political leadership. America's center of gravity is the American people, right? That's always been the case, and it will always be the case, right? I mean, everyone talks about immigrants. Oh, it's an immigrant country. It's this and that. I mean, look, there is no one abroad who looks at America and says, I'm so enthusiastic. I really want to move to a country that has an FBI. I'm really enthusiastic about a country where taxes seem pretty legitimate. No one says that. People want to join our thing, right? Our thing is the American people. So, yeah, I'm very optimistic about that. And the struggle we're involved in, it's, I'll speak for myself. It's going to last the rest of my life. I hope your younger viewers, I hope they get to see, the touchdown. Right now, we're struggling to get over the 50-yard line, and that's what our struggle is about.
Let's face it, in our busy lives, we don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. In fact, according to the CDC, only 1 in 10 Americans are eating the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables each day, missing out on essential vitamins, minerals, fibers, and antioxidants. And that's where Balance in Nature comes in. Balance in Nature sources only the best produce, free from pesticides, heavy metals, and harmful bacteria. And Balance in Nature is the best fruit and vegetable product on the market. They use only fresh, whole fruits and vegetables inside each capsule. They don't use any GMOs, fillers, binding agents, or preservatives of any kind. I would never endorse a product that I don't use myself, and since using Balance in Nature, I feel more alert, I have more energy, my focus is sharper, and I feel great. Live life to the fullest and choose Balance in Nature. P.A.S. Report listeners can get 35% off the first preferred order. Start getting the recommended daily amount of fruits and vegetables you need by using code PAS at balanceofnature.com. And I think that's the saddest part. I want my kids to experience the America I grew up in, the America where I didn't have to worry about our institutions being politically weaponized because of thoughts and ideology. But in June of 2021, the Biden administration rolled out the National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. And I used to be in emergency management. I know how to craft government documents. And it was so frightening reading it because it was so vague about anti-government sentiment, anti-authority sentiment, how those could be classified as domestic terrorism and incite domestic violent extremism. At the same time they're rolling this out, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking of all the COVID restrictions and the decrees by the little Mussolini wannabes out there. And we essentially have a system where one side is trying to declare their opposition as domestic terrorists. Do you think that they're going to be able to advance that? I mean, we saw the school board memo come out. Yeah. We saw the FBI, the Department of Justice, declare this special office of counterterrorism that they haven't spoken about. Right. We saw the whole idea of the speech panel that they wanted to put on the table.
Yeah.
Do you think they're building out the framework, the apparatus to really, truly target the American citizens that disagree with them? And does it coincide, the whole reason why Biden's going with this ultra MAGA and King MAGA nonsense? I was going to say something else, but I held my tongue.
Yeah. They've already built out the infrastructure. I mean, the infrastructure has been there since about 2003. Right, for the war, that's what was built for the war on terror. And by the way, it's very important. You mentioned something about COVID. I think it's very important that people put Anthony Fauci in his proper context. Right, Anthony Fauci, he's not just the head of the NIAID.
He's science.
Yeah, right, of course. Well, yeah, that's right. He's everything.
Yeah.
That's right. He's science and art and letters, right? He's everything. He's your entire college curriculum.
Talk about a narcissist.
Yeah. Fauci he's also our bio warfare czar, right? So all of the money that's gone to Fauci since 2003, this is why he's paid so much. This is why he has so much power on the Hill. It's because of 9/11 and the build out, right? And so all the counterterrorism stuff that was built since 9/11 and with Trump wanting to draw down and want to get out of Afghanistan and leave fewer people in Iraq, and then Biden botching the withdrawal. But now that the United States is out of Afghanistan and mostly out of Iraq, there are a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who don't have a job, right? And that was the issue. So they shifted that over. So it's partly also industrial. It's not just political. They had a whole bunch of people in Washington who needed work, who needed money. And that's what a large part of the domestic terrorism thing is about. And if you look at, it's not just government people, right? DHS. And as you said, the Disinformation Governance Board, which they'll bring back in some way if they haven't.
Oh, yeah. They're going to repackage it as something else.
Right. It's too exciting.
Yes.
Right. And remember who's taking control of the American censorship regime? It's Barack Obama. Right. He announced this at Stanford. He announced it at University of Chicago. Oh, yeah. Disinformation, he calls it.
And only they get to decide what's disinformation and misinformation.
Of course, disinformation is what you and I are doing now. Right? So that's where we're in trouble. Their big problem is that if you're going to turn on 75 million people and say, yeah, everyone who didn't vote for Joe Biden is a domestic terrorist, you're looking for trouble, right? That's chaos. And there are a lot of people, you and I'm sure you do, I'll speak for myself. I speak to people all the time who think there's a big master plan here, that they've constructed all these different scenarios and they know what will happen by doing all these different things. I don't think so. I think these people they live in a bubble inside Washington, D.C. They talk to each other. They believe different things that are absolutely nonsensical. There's a very quick example. I don't want to suck up all our time on this. If you look, when Joe Biden, just to come back to foreign policy for a second, when Joe Biden asked the Saudis not to cut oil production until after the election, right? That tells us something very, very important about the climate agenda. What it says is that they want the Green New Deal very, very much, and they're pushing that climate agenda for their donors, but they couldn't game it out right? They didn't know what the numbers would look like. They didn't know inflation would hit the way it did. And so they've got this, from their perspective, this marvelous initiative. But what happens if they can't get it through because they lose the House and the Senate in 2022? They get overrun. What are they going to do? They're stuck. Nothing. That's why they go to the Saudis and say, please help us obscure the fact that we've driven up inflation with our climate change agenda. Please help us, right? And this is why Biden is releasing another 15 million, maybe it's just 10 million
15
barrels from the strategic reserve, right? So that tells us what? It tells us they talk to each other, they have these marvelous ideas, but they can't even sit down, right, with a paper and pencil and game out what it'll look like. Well, if we shut down Keystone on day one, and then if we discourage anyone from, we discourage oil exploration or investment, what happens? Well, we've seen what happens, what inflation looks like. So I take that as another good sign. We're dealing with very dangerous people, with very nasty and angry people, but also very arrogant and not particularly bright. Still very dangerous, right? But we should be encouraged by looking at the blind spots and the flaws and the people who have identified us as adversaries. We're not saying you're our enemies, but insofar as they've called us domestic terrorists or whatever, we should get a clear picture of who they are.
That's a smart point. When it comes to the whole Saudi thing, some would actually call that collusion to manipulate an election.
Whoa. Yeah.
Definitely collusion.
Right.
But it is
with pro quo. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I constantly tell people that do bring up the idea of the master plan. Now, I do believe there are certainly forces out there that want to build this, one world, one government type model, open borders. They want to bring in the New World Order or whatever you want to call it, the Great Reset. No. But when you look at the officials, they aren't that smart. I mean, let's be honest here. If they were that smart, they would have already done it, and they would easily have done it. But they're not bright, and they constantly screw up, and they constantly make things worse. I mean, for God's sakes, in my home state of New York, you're a former New Yorker. In my home state, you had Empress Hochul come out and say that she's for more cops in the subways and more cops on the street right before the election. Everyone sees right through it. Yeah. Everyone could tell. However, they are dangerous, as you stated, and they continue to push. Do you have any concerns? See, one of my concerns is there's a lot of unstable people out there on all sides.
Yeah.
And if they keep on pushing and pushing and pushing, it's almost as if these forces in government want something to happen so that they could justify their expansion of powers, so that they could justify, see, we told you there was a domestic terror threat. Do you think that they're trying to push for something to happen?
I think they would like something like that. But I mean, yeah, because they're sick, twisted people, right? We see the violence that they employ. So would they like to be able to rationalize or legitimize more violence against their political adversaries? Absolutely. But, as we all know, once things get violent, and God willing, they won't in this country. Let's look seriously. I mean, this is what happened during the riots of spring and summer 2020, the George Floyd riots, right?
Well, just the other day, you had a Rubio campaign worker that was brutally beaten in Miami.
Right. That
won't get attention, but
right. No, you're right. They're already employing violence. I think that look, there's a lot of confidence from people on our side. They know how far. Look, you can certainly keep pushing it, but violence spins out of control very, very quickly. And let's put it like this: if I were in the Biden administration, I'd start asking very, very important questions. And I would bet you that they haven't asked certain questions, right? But first of all, let's see who we're asking the questions of. These are the same people who tragically for this country lost wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. If I were a Biden advisor, I'd say, "You sure you want to listen to these guys?" Yeah. I mean, you're America is a very, very, very big country. What are you going to do? You're going to make Liz Cheney the proconsul of the Prairie States? I mean, what are you talking about? Just everyone calm down, take it back. And by the way, President, can we get someone in here to do logistics? Because what I really want to know, being a resident of, I'm speaking hypothetically, being a resident of suburban Maryland and, Chevy Chase, 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C., can someone tell me how many trucks it would take to shut down the Beltway? Has anyone done that math? How many trucks? Because, if they shut down the Beltway, we can't get food in here. And I know the Potomac, well, why don't we get one of our admirals in here? Can we get food off the Potomac? Nope, there's nothing big enough to offload food or supplies on the Potomac. So my point is simply that they're not very bright. They're not thinking about, they don't have the ability to look past their own arrogance. And I'm confident that people that the pro-America section of America doesn't want violence, doesn't want conflict, wants to live peacefully with their neighbors, wants to raise their children, want to coach Little League. So I'm confident that things are going to. We're going to go through a little bit of a tough time, but things are generally okay.
And I'll echo those sentiments, because I do believe that there's actually much more unity on the issues than there is division, even though they like to push the division. And I do believe that there are people that I don't want Republicans to be in power and abuse power like this. I don't want them to weaponize agencies for political purposes, because when the House of Cards comes crashing down, everyone loses.
Right.
So I really appreciate the work you do. I mean, you do phenomenal work. I'm going to have links up at the P.A.S. report so that people can take a look at the books, follow you. And I really want to thank you for taking the time out to speak to the audience.
Hey, thank you. This was a lot of fun, and I hope you'll have me back on again before too long. And maybe, especially if Lee Zeldin wins, Lee Zeldin becomes governor in New York. That'll be exciting, and we can talk about it, because I think that's an indication how well he's doing of what you were saying, that people are united, people care about the same things, whether it's crime or violence, they don't want it. And
100%.
And Americans agree on the big issues.
Absolutely. And that's what gives me the optimism. So, and I definitely would love to have you back on. And remember, from what I understand, you're President Trump's favorite author.
Yeah, that was a very flattering post on Truth Social. I appreciate that.
What a great conversation and a great guy. Be sure to check out Lee's books, The Plot Against the President and The Permanent Coup, and follow him on Twitter. I have all the links up at the PAS Report website in the show notes. So go to PASreport.com. Just an announcement. So the election is tomorrow. Normally I record, and the episode comes out at 2 a.m. on Wednesday. That's not happening this week. And it's not happening because I want to give you a proper election analysis. So this week's episode is going to drop either later on Wednesday or Thursday morning. This way, I could provide you with an analysis that you deserve. As always, please share this episode with family, friends, and on social media. If you find the podcast informative, please give the PAS Report a 5-star rating and write a review on Apple Podcasts. I want to thank you for joining me, and I will be back later this week with another great episode of the PAS Report Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.